We are going to start now, and we are going to discuss digital packaging solutions for scalable and profitable reuse and refill systems in quick service restaurants, events and festivals. I'm going to introduce the esteemed panel of industry experts with global knowledge, with a lot of live systems that are already active and in the public area. Hopefully it's going to be lively and also some fun. I know this group, so probably. But I will let the panel introduce themselves, and then we'll work through the questions depending on the time, and hopefully some question and answer session at the end. So, Mason, would you like to start and introduce yourself?
Sure, and it's a pleasure to be on the stage here with these wonderful innovators. Some people are calling it the most handsome panel in reuse. Not me, but some people. Oh, most diverse, right. Maybe the whitest panel in reuse. My name is Mason Hines. I'm with PR3. We're developing standards for reusable packaging systems. And the standards cover the full range of the system, from washing to reverse logistics and collection points. But the one most germane to this discussion is our digital standard, which helps set a common digital language for reuse systems to enable interoperability when there are multiple players in the same system.
Stuart.
Hi, I'm Stuart. I'm co-founder of Reposit with my wife Jo, which came out of Beauty Kitchen. So we started with beauty products and put our products into reusable packaging, and then started to do it for everybody else. So our role is to create, design, and operate reuse systems for the benefit of stakeholders. We are the highest rated B Corporation in the world, and we believe in people, planet, and profit, and we believe in data to drive much better reuse decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Davide from Sykell. We also believe in data. We are running a very large reuse system in Germany with a clear focus on retail, so takeaway food and similar packaging for all German retailer system. And at the same time, we operate a solution called Circular ERP, which is a data management for connecting all the different components, partners, and environment in a reuse system into one single point of contact. So you can really see your data and the benefits, whether the system is running in a financially positive and a sustainability positive way.
Over to you, Geir.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Geir Sæther. I'm heading up Tomra Reuse, which is a corporate venture within Tomra Systems. We develop solutions based on reusable takeaway packaging for food and drinks. Currently, we have two main solutions. One solution for cities or densely populated areas, where we have the first pilot in Aarhus, Denmark. And we are now going to roll out the second system in Lisbon, Portugal, probably in October. The second solution we are offering now is an event solution for arenas, festivals, etc. And I also believe in data.
Oh, and Noam.
Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon. Happy to be here today. I'm Noam Assael. I'm from Avery, Dennison as Peter. I'm part of a team that is working on connected packaging. And actually my specialty is reuse and refill. We make RFID, which actually enables to collect the data or to make the magic on reuse and refill. We're very much experienced in RFID. We've been doing it for more than 20 years in different areas, and now we're happy that finally food and beverages and events are starting to adopt this technology, and happy to be here today.
Thank you. You're working? Yeah? It's okay. Thank you.
Introduce yourself, Peter.
Yes. Well. So I should introduce myself. My name's Peter Jackson from Avery Dennison. I work alongside Noam in the connected packaging team. So very much connecting from brands and also with reuse refill of how do we add a digital element to a physical packaging, whether that's for consumer engagement or complete end-to-end logistics. And that, that's different for different parties, but we connect all of that together. So that's a lot of what we're supporting. Some of it's very early. What I would say from the panel here, they're at the moment being quite humble because all of these are involved in live projects, which hopefully from the questions that are going to come out, you'll start to hear about actual projects. I know Geir mentioned a couple of his projects, but hopefully we can really share not just about this will be the future, this is happening now and is scaling now, and then we want to talk about ensuring this becomes profitable so we can move away from single use. So the first question, and I'm going to put some of the questions maybe to one or two of the panel, but the first question is to everybody, and maybe again Mason will start there and work back, is how do you define digital packaging for reuse and refill? How would you define it? How do you see it in today and moving forward?
I think I'm probably going to give the most basic answer, and then these wonderful solution providers will elaborate. For me, I define digital packaging very broadly, just any kind of packaging that carries a data carrier that has a used digital language attached to it. There are many traditional reuse systems in existence today that have no data attached to them. Some of them are working, some of them are not. But for me, it's very simple. It's just there's data somehow attached to the container or the assets that are in a reuse system. Simple as that.
Stuart.
I might go even a bit simpler or blue sky. It's anything that is recognizable within a system. So I think with consumer interaction going forwards and AI recognition, et cetera, there's asset tracking and unique coding. There's lots of new digital marketing solutions. But super high level, my view of what's digital packaging is anything that provides a better outcome for any of the stakeholders in the system.
Can you go simpler? Can we go even?
I think I can go even simpler. I will give you my definition. So reusable packaging is nothing new. We are adding the digital part now, but reusable packaging is something that's been around for hundreds of years. So until we started using plastic as a single-use kind of thingy, every piece of packaging was reusable. Your parents, grandparents probably didn't throw away glass bottles, right? So it was designed to be used and reused until it would break down and you get a new one. So this is what we are now transporting to 2025, skipping this last 30, 40 years of overconsumption. But we want to add to the same model that our parents and grandparents were using. We add in then the convenience that consumers expect in 2025. And there where is the digital component allow us to go back in time with the convenience of the modern days. Simple enough?
Yeah, so if I remember the question, it was what means digital packaging
What are
to
the
me?
benefits?
And to me, it probably just means that you have a packaging with some additional data associated with the packaging. And more specifically for reusable packaging, we in Tomra have concluded that for the system to be transparent, to have provide a suitable system integrity, you need serialized packages. So meaning each and every package is unique.
So even if you have 1 million items, they all look identical, they're unique.
Yes.
So I'll pick up from where my good friend Geir finished. For me, a digital packaging is a packaging that has a unique ID, and each actually ID has a journey, a traceability, that we know what this packaging has gone through. There are a lot of events that happen to the packaging. So we know when the packaging was made, we know when the packaging was first filled, when it was returned, when it was washed. And all of that history is being possible just because it has a unique ID. So actually the physical side gets a digital replica which is unique for each and every packaging. That's a digital packaging for me, and we'll talk about the advantages, of course, as we go along.
No, thank you. And I guess starting maybe with Davide, what are the benefits and the value of a digital packaging in the reuse, refill for customers or consumers and the brands? So where's that sort of benefit?
I would start with the brands, because for consumers, maybe I will leave it to somebody else, but for brands, packaging is a cost. And right now, single-use cost is very cheap. So single-use packaging, is very cheap. So reusable packaging has to reach a level of convenience, also from a financial perspective, that doesn't bother too much. So there are two big advantages on the digital solutions here. From one side is enable the, let's say, it gives more value to the packaging itself, because you can use the digital link to actually create a new experience. So the packaging is a vehicle for digital information, for extra information that doesn't need to be printed on the packaging. And at the same time, for the entire supply chain, having a very clear identification of the packaging allows to reach a level of optimization and let's say convenience through the entire supply chain, so that the final cost for running the system is realistically low enough to be comparable with single use.
Yeah, no, great. And Geir, you sort of started this conversation just now. Where do you see the benefits for the brands? I mean, the city project and also festivals. So for the brands and consumers, the speed?
Definitely, but maybe like Davide, I will start with the brands. You know, in the future, brands need a license to operate. What does that mean? Well, it partly means, I think, that they need sustainable, responsible solutions. So, and then, of course, packaging is one important element. So a digitized packaging with a unique serial number will enable the brands to sort of demonstrate and prove that this package is sustainable, it's being reused a number of times, etc. That is only possible, I think, if you have a digital number on the package. Then I also alluded earlier to that digital packaging enables transparency, which is basically this ability to report on how many, or the report on the environmental impact of this packaging, which is basically a function of how many times has this reusable packaging been circulated. But also a very important thing is to make the system safe and have a high system integrity, meaning it cannot be cheated. With reusable packaging, you need a return incentive. And our experience in Tomra is that the most efficient return incentive is a financial return incentive. And then when you're talking about money and, for example, deposit, it gets very attractive to cheat the system. And serialized packaging provides an efficient way to avoid cheating. So that's also extremely important.
I want maybe to connect to what was said now is actually when you look at the packaging and when you look at the deposit is super essential. If there's no deposit, packages don't come back. And we actually, on a reuse system, the most important parameter that we're measuring a good system is actually the return rates. We want that as many as possible packages will come back. 80, 90, 95%, that's our goal. So we have to make sure that all of us as consumers, when we wear that hat, we have an incentive to come back. So Geir's remark about deposit, it's a great remark. And it could be done manually, but not at scale. If you want to work at scale, imagine people coming to a festival and each one has to stand in line to pay his deposit, or even worse, to get back a deposit. And when you see solutions, reverse vending machines like what Tomra is offering, that you can take a big stack of cups, throw them to the machine, immediately get the deposit, that incentivizes the people to return back the cups. So make it easy, put a deposit, and make sure that you have a very high return rate.
Great, thanks, Noam. Mason, do you think legislation, which we hear a lot about, PPWR, DPP, etc., and there's more and more, but it's still a bit regional and then even into countries from a legislation point of view. Do you think that's going to help or hinder the development and adoption of reuse? What's your views? You're doing a lot of research on this. What's your views?
Well, I think, of course, it depends on the legislation, but assuming we're talking about something like the PPWR or a legislation that's meant to enable reuse, I think it can only, no, I won't say it can only help, but I think it'll largely help. I mean, I think it could help and hinder, but mostly help. I think to the points made earlier, every actor in these supply chains is running a business, and cost is among probably the most important thing when you're running a business. And so when you're being asked to take on an additional cost or make a change in your business, which itself has a cost, that's a difficult ask unless you're doing it in concert with the rest of the industry. And most of the time, the way that you do it in concert with the rest of the industry is because of some requirement or some sort of legislation. And so for me, I think there's a tremendous opportunity for it to be enabling. We see that in Europe in markets that have enabling policy. And so I think there's just opportunities to replicate that throughout the world. I say that as an American, probably not there super soon, but we are seeing it in individual states. So I hope to see more of that.
Thanks. Stuart, you're working across a number of regions that I know. I don't know how many of them you can talk about today. But legislation, is that interesting from a different region point of view? And I know it's really quite a few different regions.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few key points in legislation. Industry does not like legislation being done to them. But if industry would like the legislation to be the right legislation, there needs to be a lot more activity on producing the data that's required from actually doing reuse and refill activities at scale to inform what the right legislation is. And, whether that's slowly increasing EPR fees, whether that's bans or whatever it is, it's got to be a collaboration between industry and the policymakers. And the only way that common ground can be reached is with policy. So we're working on a reusable cup scheme in Glasgow, which is Borrow Cup, where we've got a city, and we've currently got, as of today, as another cohort join the system, but we're at 100 locations in one city, all using the same standardised reusable cup. There's been a consultation in Scotland on a latte levy of a charge for every single-use cup. Now, is that required? Will that be put into force, or will Borrow Cup inform whether that's required? So we've got a test going on in 5 locations where they are charging the additional 20p for a single-use cup, so we can measure the impact. Does that decrease the location's profitability? Does it drive switching? And that can be used to inform the future policy. And it's similar we're operating a project in Canada with Walmart, Loblaws, Unilever, L'Oreal, etc. It's not quick service restaurants, events or festivals, but it's about informing what that future policy is. My final point on global legislation, we're dealing with global supply chains. So there's a lot of activity working on local solutions, but a lot of the big players in the market are operating global businesses and global supply chains. So I think there is an opportunity for a lot more alignment across the global policy framework.
Go ahead, Geir, jump in.
I mean, am I allowed?
Of
Because,
course.
I mean, this is a super interesting and critical, it's a key question. We have to be honest, at least most of the time. I think it is a truth that reusable packaging will always be less convenient than disposable packaging. And I think in 99% of the cases, reusable packaging will be a little bit more expensive than disposable packaging. Meaning there is no way reusable packaging will become the standard and not the exception unless we have some kind of regulations. Sorry, I don't believe it. There's no way we can beat the optimized convenience of single use and the optimized supply chain cost of single use. It's not a coincidence that 99% of the sort of value chains today are linear and based on single-use packaging.
Agreed.
Let me challenge this. Come on, in a good way. In a
We're off now. Here we go.
Yes, you're right, but I think we ignore one important fact. The important fact is that we are not accounting for the costs of single use, just because we are not paying directly. So the brands are not paying directly. I mean, there is component in the PR, etc. But we delegate this responsibility to the cities, to the municipalities, which makes it non-transparent. So we don't know how many taxes are we paying, you and me, in different cities every month or every year for the collection of the single-use packaging, for the cleaning on the streets, for the littering, and so on and on, for let's say, the resources that we're wasting, which makes the comparison unfair and very difficult to put on the same stage. But I think if we move ahead also from a legislative perspective and start looking at systems, not just at the pure convenience of one single actor, but the community value, that is where the single-use packaging might not look that exciting anymore. But this is a very long-term conversation. It's not easy to implement. So you're right. From a convenience perspective, it is indeed more evident and more visible, the convenience for the single use, but just because we are not looking at the full picture.
I agree.
Can I completely derail then? So just coming back to the consumer question. So consumer is king. All of these organizations in the brands we've talked about and the proposition, we need to stop talking about cost and start talking about value. And a lot of these big organizations, they are marketing organizations that just happen to sell products, and the consumer is the most important. So if I'm talking to a retailer or a brand, I'm talking about how do I create additional value, not about cost. Because if we can create a commercial proposition that isn't about packaging cost, but it's about, we've talked about return rate being the most important metric. Once return rate gets to a point, I would argue that's not the most important metric. It's about repeat rate. So is the customer doing it again and again and again? And are they doing it in more scenarios? So how do we take an incredible experience in an event, which is where most people are experiencing reuse for the first time? How do we normalize that behavior when you're not at an event, when you're not at a festival? How do we normalize that behavior when you're on the high street? That's the critical piece, and that's what I would include in repeat rate and putting the consumer-centric design and linking usage scenarios together, which is where data becomes even more critical.
So let me sort of build on that a little bit. And Stuart, I'll let you come back to you first, as in let you carry on. So two things. One, I think the important thing to mention about the Borrow Cup in Glasgow is that there's multiple brands, well-known high street brands, all using the same cup, but it looks the same. So it's not branded, and I can mention some names, Costa, Burger King. It's actually, they all look the same. When that was first put on the table, I wasn't sure this was, I don't think anyone really thought, how would this happen? And I think people perhaps suggested it, almost carried out the room and come back later. It's now happened. So that's a part of standardisation, which I think is a really big turning point, that the major brands said, you know what, this is great, this is good, and we'll forego, at this stage, our branding. Really unusual for big brands. So, the question, and Stuart, I'll let you sort of carry on from this, but there's two parts to it. One is, what is the significance of standardisation for digital packaging in reuse and refill? And then part of that, so we can combine it, is what is the value of information sharing among all the parties in the supply chain? And the reason why this can be really exciting but really challenging is, I suspect, a lot of great organisations in the audience, and obviously displaying out there, they want to promote their product. So if we have a standard product, how does everyone feel about that? As in, it's only that style, it's not 100 different types that are available out there. So, Stuart, over to you from how does it work with standardisation, your view, and this might be for everyone to jump in, I think, and also from the data sharing perspective of how is that going to work and what's the feeling amongst competitors and brands and consumers.
So standardization is a scary word because people think that that means everything is identical, right? So we're not going to start selling coffee in water bottles or water in coffee cups. It's about a continuum. So as scale grows, the number of standards will grow. So is it forever that Costa can't have a Costa branded cup in a standardized platform? It's not just the packaging, it can be the logistics, the data backbones, the washing facilities. So when some people may have heard me tell this story before, but in 1963, somebody turned up to a show just like this and presented a plastic bottle, new invention, and everyone said, "That's amazing. What sizes and shapes does it come in?" And they said, "None. It's just this one, it's the standard." And as volumes grew, the number of sizes, neck finishes, materials, as volumes grew, people could afford to create their own standards. And that's what will happen in reuse at scale, is there will be lots of standards. So don't be scared of the word standardization. It's just a replacement for efficiency. Then just in terms of the data, the opportunity is linking consumer experience in our opinion. And the power to create commercial value. So knowing a consumer bought that product in that store, returned it to that store, that they've also returned those other items, enables us to drive the commercial model to say, well, that customer might also like this. How do we educate them on the other options that are available for them?
And I was going to say, everybody jump in on this one because it can be a hot topic, but it feels like it's the future.
Naturally, I have something to say about standardization. I would say maybe not a scary word, maybe a thrilling word. Scary like a roller coaster. There's some excitement with it as well. And I would also say that, standardization is not just physical standardization to where the containers might have a similar shape or you might have different classes of the same container. There's a lot of system standardization. Importantly, since we're on this panel, digital standardization that is as important to these brands and their supply chain partners as the physical look. The reality today, and there's a building out here full of beautiful reuse solutions, many of them take you outside your normal shopping experience in ways big or small, whether it's an extra scan or you have to go into an app, or even for the business, like there's different inventory management. And I think as long as that's the case, you will, a company like your major companies, your Walmarts, your McDonald's, your companies serving millions and millions and billions of people every day are not going to do a full-scale transition to reuse. And so that's why at PR3 we're developing a digital standard that's a shared digital language so that you can still have all of your solutions, all of your platforms as a provider, but your system can talk to all of the other systems that are part of that reuse supply chain, and you can share the data that you need to make a system work. So in addition to packaging standardization, there's many other ways in which there needs to be alignment among systems, and that's why I think it's thrilling.
And I think that also when we're looking at packaging standardization, even if we decide to use the same vessel, still we can play a lot with the decoration. So we can take a cup, and today it has a label which shows one brand, we wash it, we replace it with another label. So there is still ways to make the system very, very efficient, but several brands can use the same vessel, and still you have a different shelf appeal if it's on the shelf, or if it's in the restaurant, or if it's in the event. But having said that, I would say that if you are in an event, actually have a very ugly cup. Because we as consumers, if the cup is very nice, we tend to take them home. And if we want to do a reuse cup again and again, to have a high reuse rate and repeat rate, actually the cups do not need to look so nice. So people will return them back and we can reuse them again.
And definitely don't put like SPG or your favorite sports team's logo on there, because that's gone.
Yeah, apparently I heard the one about quite a big rock band. It was something like Metallica. that was their view. They wanted it, all of their, not just the merchandise, obviously that's for selling, but their drinks cups to be reusable. So I think they started in London, all branded, looks fantastic. By the time they got to Paris, there were no cups left because everyone wanted to keep it as a souvenir. So I think that ties in exactly. Any other points? Or we're going to sort of probably got about 10 minutes, a few more questions. So perhaps if you could give your views, and by anyone, please jump in, but maybe Davide, on your thoughts on how to build and scale a profitable reuse and refill solution. How do you build? Where do you sort of start and then move, accelerate?
I think solution is a good word. A much better word is a system. And I think this is the biggest challenge, right? So maybe we haven't really tapped into that enough yet. Accidentally, reuse systems are part of this macro movement of circular economy. What is circular economy? You are not independent from your supplier, your client, the system around you. You are massively dependent on them, to the point that you need to guarantee not only that your company is successful and can achieve profitability and have a good financial outcome, but you really need to make sure that everybody within the network achieve the same level of success. Imagine a reuse system where there is no profit for the washers. Nobody will wash anymore, and eventually the system will not work. Same topic with logistics for the merchants. If it's too expensive, nobody will use it. So I think data here, again, comes in place and allow us to reach, first of all, optimizations, so that every partner, every element of this chain can really reach those economies of scale and the volumes that allow them to offer the cheapest and most realistic pricing, but still to the point that everybody has to share the value of the system. And this is where it's very difficult. It's an extremely collaborative environment where the players need to work together to achieve success.
Noam, do you want to give your thoughts on scale and profitability?
I think that we all know as operators or companies which are working on the space that reuse systems, many times they require a lot of labor. They require a lot of manual work, especially on the reverse logistics. When we come back, when we return the packaging, so there is a reverse vending machine or a box that we throw the cups away, and then the journey starts. Someone has to collect them, has to sort them, has to clean them, has to manage all of that inventory, and this is a lot of work. And actually, digital systems help to automate all of these processes. So if I am now collecting cups from a stadium, from a big event, and I have to count how many cups as an operator I'm getting back, if I have to count them one by one, it's a lot of time and a lot of people. But actually, if I have a digital trigger on the cups, I can scan at once the full pallet, and I can understand how many cups were returned. No argument with the local operator in the stadium, and I save labor. The same goes for sorting. If I know what's in the box before I open the box or the tray, and maybe I don't need to sort out foreign items from the tray, it goes less work. The same goes for inventory. If I know exactly where my assets are, who is holding them, how many I have in stock, how many cups have done 30 cycles, 40 cycles, which means that I have to order new cups and I don't need to order too much new cups. So all of that visibility allows us to reduce labor, to reduce the amount of stock that we need, and this is the big advantage actually of a digital system from my perspective.
Thank you. So couple of questions left. The first one may be a quick one, and then we can get into a bit more detail in the second. But something I think is really important. We're talking about reuse. That's exciting. It's round and round. But at some point, we've got to talk about end of life of that packaging. So the question, and maybe Mason, I'll put this to you first, but will recycling be the unlock or the blocker to advance digital reuse and refill in sort of festivals, quick service restaurants, etc., and events? do you think it's going to speed it up or slow it down from recycling? So we talk about cradle to cradle now. So it's product is born, it goes all the way through, and then we want to reborn that product.
Yeah, and maybe I'd invite others to respond to this, because in my mind, the recycling doesn't necessarily need to, it won't be a blocker or an enabler necessarily of a reuse system. You can have a perfectly fine reuse system without having to interface necessarily with the recycling system for many, many turns of that packaging until the end of life. And so for me, it's just a consideration at the beginning of the system development, and really just at the asset development when you're manufacturing it, making sure that it's compatible with the end-of-life solutions that are available in your markets in the same way that you do with a single-use packaging. And then the added component when we're talking about digital solutions is recognizing that, especially with a label or with an RFID chip, those materials might be different than the rest of your container, and so just have a plan, or know that your municipality or region has a plan for separation at end of life, so you don't ruin that recyclate stream.
Anybody? Stuart?
So to be controversial, I'd argue that we should not be talking about end of life either. So it might be the end of use of that material in that current format, but it's not the end of life for that material. So
Good answer.
let's stop thinking that end of life for anything is acceptable. If I talk about end of life to my children, it's a pretty scary conversation. So let's talk about the end of use of the material in its current format. So whilst I may use this water bottle made of aluminium 500 times, when I return it, it might be dented and not useful in its current format, but that material can be recycled into a new bottle. And that's why we have to consider designing for circularity and keeping cradle-to-cradle principles at the heart of everything. And that's where, making sure that there are plastic recycling facilities. So at the moment, I can talk about end of use of the cup, but if that cup's damaged, ultimately I want to send that to Berry's recycling facility, which is a PP food grade recycling facility that can make that cup back into a new cup. Is it perfectly circular? No, but if I can get a 95% yield, then I'm talking about 5% material being end of life, designed for reuse.
No, thank you for, I think,
Do you mind if
turning
I add
terminology.
something? Sorry, just to add a small thing on this, right? We think about recycling as a fantastic process that runs in a virtual environment, right? Unfortunately, right now, recycling has a lot of variables, right? So you just throw something into the bin, this bin is kind of sorted, and you try to figure out what materials were inside and how to be recycled in the most efficient way. At the end, just a very small portion of that gets recycled. One big advantage of reuse systems is that usually the discard moment happen at the washing facility, right? When you recognize, okay, this cup has been used too long, I actually need to recycle it now. So it's a much cleaner recycling stream, mono-material, because you're recovering, you know exactly what material is in there, you have your own code, you know the composition, and you can send it directly to a very pure recycling stream. So the efficiency of such recycling is close to 100% versus very few percent of a normal open system.
Thank you. Good. No, anybody? No. So final question from our side, because I know we're probably getting the 2-minute mark, and we'll get a few minutes. Is for everybody. So can you provide insights into the future? And again, to remind, all of the panel here are working on live projects, but can you provide insights into the future of digital packaging for reuse and refill and its potential impact? So how do you see, whether that's in your own view, 6 months, 5 years, it doesn't matter. It's your answer, and we'll start Mason, or would you want me to start this end?
No,
Go ahead.
these guys have really profound things to say, so I'll start. I think for me, you don't really have to think about a future state. You can look at today's state, because especially when we're talking about a harmonized or a standardized digital language, you know that solution is scalable. You know that there's value in that because it's what all of our multi-billion-dollar corporations and supply chains are already doing. They're already using a shared digital language. I'll give a shout out to GS1 that has a panel or a booth out in front. Most consumer goods and most, especially for food and beverage companies, are using that shared language. We built our standard on that language as well so that reusables can integrate into our massive retailers, our Walmarts, our Aholds, our Amazons, in just the same way that single-use packaging is, without asking them to change their established practices, which they won't for reuse, frankly.
Stuart.
Very quickly, it will be the center of creating value for every single person in the value chain. So whether that's the packaging producer, the washer, the consumer, the retailer, the brand, it will be the thing that transforms value.
Davide.
I'm gonna give you maybe my personal expectation for the longer term. What we are experiencing today and all this obstacle for the consumer acceptance, this is because we're in a transition phase, right? So we're moving from something into something else. So it includes, deposit, it includes working with app, traceability. Fantastic scenario for me is that every packaging is reusable. At that stage, you don't need to bring it back, you don't need to count, you don't need to hold deposit. You just recover it at home as you would recover everything in your reusable pack, and then the community, like the cities, are taking care of your packaging, just that instead of throwing into a recycling facility, they're throwing into a sorting and reuse one.
Geir.
Yeah, it's a hard question. I don't believe reusable packaging is sort of a silver bullet, which always will be the best solution. I think for some applications, reusable packaging will become the norm because it makes sense. For others, I think recycling is probably going to be the preferred solution, depending on a lot of factors. But I think the key here to be able to provide a prosperous, bright future for reusable packaging depends on creating a level playing field for the industries. So yeah, because like I alluded to earlier, there are some strong forces against reusable packaging, and those forces have to be overcome. And I think, I'm afraid the only solution is, or the main solution is regulations.
No.
I feel that wherever it makes sense to have a reusable packaging, there will be a reusable packaging that it makes sense from an economical point of view. But I think that in the future, there will be no doubt that the reusable packaging has to have a digital ID. And every reusable item will have a digital ID, and it will not be a question. And I see that evolving. About 2-3 years ago, when we were talking to people sitting in this panel or people which are exhibiting here, there was always a question, convince me why I need a digital trigger. Then we saw the transition going into QR codes, that everyone now has a QR code. This was not obvious a few years ago. And now we're seeing the transition, like all of the cups here on the table that have a RFID on them, because we understand that digital can save us and make the systems more efficient. So for me, in short, in the future, every reusable packaging will have a digital ID, will have a digital trigger that makes sense to that application, and that's the future that I see.
Thank you. Are we allowed? We're not allowed questions. So I would say if there are any questions, grab the panel. We've pushed over a few minutes. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience, and hope you enjoyed it. Merci, and enjoy the rest of the event.